Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. My name is John Watts. This is really the third part of our series on three types of dispute letters. So we've spoken about just a general dispute letter, and then number two, a request for information. You're requesting information, requesting documents from a debt collector. Well, what's the third letter? That's the refuse to pay letter, sometimes called a cease communication, cease and desist. But the more correct term for it that's in the statute is a refuse to pay letter. And that's where you say to the debt collector, I refuse to pay you. And when they get that, they are to honor that and not communicate with you, except for some very small exceptions. But they're not to suddenly go, oh, well, let me prove to you now that you owe this debt since you're refusing to pay. That's a violation of law. And this is under section 1692C and then in parentheses C again. So 1692CC. And so what's the basis of this? Well, it's to tell a debt collector that you refuse to pay. And when you refuse to pay a debt, that means don't contact me. Now, they can sue you, they can credit report. What they're not supposed to do is call you or write you letters, again, with some very, very small exceptions. And if they call you, if they write you a normal type letter, then that violates the law and you can look at suing them. And we've talked about that in other videos. You can sue for $1,000 up to $1,000 in what are called statutory damages. You can get actual damages for economic loss, for emotional distress, which is very typical in this. If you tell a debt collector, look, I refuse to pay this debt, you expect to be left alone. And then when they just completely ignore that, just blow past what you say, and they're like, we don't care about you, we don't care about the law, we're going to communicate with you anyway. Well, obviously that's very upsetting. They need to compensate you for that. Get attorney's fees, get the cost of litigation. So here's a typical example, or I'll give you two examples of when you would use a refuse to pay letter. First would be when it's beyond the statute of limitations, usually beyond the time period to credit report. So the statute of limitations in your state may be 3 years or 4 years or 6 years or 10 years, whatever it is. It's beyond that time period. They cannot sue you. There's no danger of being sued. Well, they can still sue you, but that would violate the FDCPA, and then you would sue them for doing that. So you say, you know what, they're not supposed to sue me. So I'm not worried about them, sort of making them mad and they sue me. And often it's beyond the time period to credit report. So this is a really old debt, and they're bugging you about it, and you just say, you know what, I don't want to hear from you, I don't want to deal with you, I never want to think about you again. Here's a refuse to pay letter. Leave me alone. Okay? And they're supposed to. If they don't, you sue them, and that encourages them to leave you alone, because now they got to pay money. And if they bug you again, they got to pay more money. Okay? Now, another scenario is you might be within the time period for them to sue you, and you send them a request for information letter. That's what we talked about in the previous video. And that's just where you're asking for documents, sometimes called debt validation, debt verification letter. But I think the more descriptive term is request for information. That comes from the world of RESPA, R-E-S-P-A. When we're dealing with mortgage companies, we can send them a request for information. Hey, give me this information, give me these documents. I think that's a better way of describing this FDCPA letter. Now, they don't give it to you, okay? You ask for a bunch of stuff, you explain why you need it, and they just like, we don't care what you ask. Well, then it makes sense that you may follow that up with a refuse to pay. It's like, I asked you for this information, you refused to give it to me, I don't really know who you are, I don't trust you, I refuse to pay. And so there's a natural progression to it, right? So imagine they knock on your door, you open the door, they say, hey, my name is John Watts, you owe me $1,000. And you say, well, John, what are you collecting? What's this debt? Give me some proof. And I go, I'm collecting this old credit card debt. Give me $1,000. Well, you might say, you know what? You didn't give me very much information. I specifically asked you, like, which debt and why do you have the right to collect this and what are you doing here? And you refuse to give me that. You know what? I refuse to pay you. If you're not going to give me enough information, I refuse to pay. You can imagine you get a phone call and somebody says, oh, well, this is Bob with the IRS. I need you to Western Union me some money. You might go, well, Bob from the IRS? Which tax year is this? And give me a phone number to call you back. Make sure you're legit. I'm not giving you that. You must pay me now. You might go, you know what, buddy? I refuse to pay. Now, I'm just saying you can say that over the phone. To really implement this when we're not dealing with the scam company, but under the FDCPA, refuse pay has to be in writing. Okay, so verbally telling them is not enough under the FDCPA. That may change when there's some new rules out, but as I'm recording this now, if you want to stop communication, it has to be in writing. Something else, a lot of times people will say, well, I don't want you to call me anymore. I demand that you cease communications over the phone. It's not really what the law says. It's like a light switch. Either refuse to pay, in other words, stop all communication, or not. There isn't really well, you can write me but not call me, or call me but not write me. And so, again, you might use this when it's a really old debt or when they just refuse to give you information and you're like, you know what, then I'm not going to deal with you. And what we find is a lot of times the collectors, they realize, oh, we blew it. We should have answered your questions. And even though we're violating the law, we know we're violating the law, we're going to send you this information to try to pull the money out of you. Well, guess what? In that situation, there needs to be money flowing, but not from you to them. It needs to be from them to you. Okay? So hopefully this is helpful to you. We've spoken about just a normal dispute letter, which I think it should always be present. I dispute owing any and all debts that you claim I owe. And then you have a choice, either a request for information or a refuse to pay. Don't combine those in one letter. That doesn't work. But you might start with request for information and then end with the refuse to pay. And then see what the collector does. Do they honor this? Do they follow the law? Or do they break the law? And then you need to look at suing them under the FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So I hope that this was helpful to you. Remember, we have a webinar tomorrow, Thursday, June 17 at 11 a.m. Central Time, disputemasterclass.com, or the actual link will be in the description and a comment. You can go there, you can register. I think we've got 100-something people registered for it. Totally free. We'll talk about these letters, talk about when to use them. I'll give you templates, I'll give you forms, checklists, all that type of stuff. And if you have a chance to be there, that'll be great. And if you can't make it, still sign up and you'll get the replay link and then you can watch it at your convenience. So you take care and I'll catch you tomorrow. All right, bye-bye.